No worries.
All right. Mike Toffan, good morning. How are you?
Oh, good morning. Doing really good. Thanks, Trevor. Thanks for having us here today.
I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, of course. Whenever we have the opportunity to get out and let more people know about Project Forest, we're happy to engage and participate in conversations like this. So certainly
That's
a
awesome.
pleasure.
And you are the founder of Project Forest?
Yeah, founder and what Forestry manager is, I guess, the title we've given myself, and it's just an idea that's probably a little bit over a year in the making, and we're super happy to launch in October of this year.
That's really cool. So I'm guessing you don't have a problem getting Christmas trees at Christmas as we approach the holidays.
No, no Project Forest Christmas trees yet, but maybe 5, 6, 7 years from now, that's a really good idea to get some of our partners out there and have a Christmas event. Yeah, I like it.
So were you, long story short, you started Project Forest now, but were you always into reforestation and the environment?
Yeah, I guess a little bit of background is I have a technical diploma from NAIT and a degree in forest business management, all in forestry. And from an early days of my career in the early 2000s, I've always kind of found myself in the reforestation side of the business. Life kind of takes you in certain directions. I applied for many different jobs out of school and as a summer student, and I kept getting hired to do silviculture, which is, the art and science of growing trees. And I've always kind of had a green thumb, a passion for growing things, and it seems to have been a natural fit and a passion of mine. And pretty happy to, be where I am now today. It's a lot of years, a lot of hard work to, you never know where you're going to end up once you graduate from school, and I'm happy to, be where I'm at.
So when you finished up school, you went to work at a different company, obviously. That was Tree Time, or what's the?
Yeah, I guess the trajectory is not to date myself. I'm sure there's older people than me out there, but I graduated in 06. And then I worked in Manitoba for a year as a woodlot forester. So my job out there was to help landowners come up with woodlot management plans, primarily farmers, which is kind of similar to what we're doing now. But instead of just clearing the land with a dozer and burning piles, what we would do is find a market for the timber on their land as they expanded their farms. Or, other landowners will be looking for management plans to improve the amount of rabbits or grouse or deer on their property for some recreational and hunting opportunities. And the program that I worked for was called the Manitoba Agro Woodlot Association, helped these landowners accomplish those goals. And then I was there for just over a year and got a job at a forest product company in Boyle called Miller Western Forest Products, local here to Edmonton, and they have a few mills across the province. That's kind of where I cut my teeth and learned really how to grow and plant a whole crap load of trees. I mean, our programs range from 3 to 6 million trees per year that we'd plant. And a lot of that fell, obviously not day one on my shoulders, but by the time we left, it did. And then I made the jump to oil and gas reclamation in 2011. 2011? Yeah, I think something like that.
Yeah.
The legislation changed in 2010, and not everybody is super familiar with it, but now all of the oil and gas sites or any associated facilities in the forest have to be brought back to what they call equivalent landscape criteria or equivalent landscape capability. So bringing some forestry expertise into the environmental field to help the energy industry meet these new requirements is when I made that transition, and then made the jump to Tree Time Services in 2015 and started Project Forest here just a couple months ago.
That's really cool. And the idea behind Project Forest is to allow corporate companies to give back with donations so that you guys can plant more trees, in a nutshell?
Yeah, in a nutshell, for sure. We're able to help solve some problems that I believe corporations are trying to solve. At Tree Time Services, we were founded in 2002, and our main goal back then was just to be the marketing agent for what's called the Coast to Coast group of nurseries. We produce 50 to 60 million trees per year in 5 different facilities across the province, and all those orders come through our office. And what that means is the phone is always ringing for people looking to grow or potentially buy trees. And we started a couple other business ventures around that marketing association with the nurseries. But corporations, you know, just recently, probably like 24 months ago, especially after the Fort McMurray fires happened, people were looking to give back and make a difference. And it's really hard to find places on Crown land to plant trees. It's actually against law to do it on public land. We don't need to get into the nitty gritty of the provincial legislation, but you can't really just go buy a tree and plant it in the forest. And there's 92 different seed zones in the province. What that also means is you can't collect seed from Edmonton and plant it in Fort McMurray. You need to have local seed. So kind of bringing all that legislation into place has created a really large challenge for corporations looking to give back. And when people keep calling and asking the same questions, you know, month over month, because we get a couple calls, you know, a month for people looking to do this type of thing. I'm like, man, what can we do? What can we do? And I just, you know, people have the moments in, you know, the garage or for a walk. I was having a shower when it kind of came to me one morning, and I'm like, oh, let's come up with an opportunity to plant a significant amount of trees in a single location funded by multiple corporations. We're going to create a community of like-minded, environmentally responsible businesses, and we're all going to work together on that unified goal. And, you know, our tagline is rewilding Alberta, one forest at a time. So that's all kind of come together from an idea into a shower and into a for real non-for-profit. And I talk about Tree Time and Project Forest. The associations are quite close. Tree Time has been, you know, gracious enough to support and invest in Project Forest and has funded it to date exclusively, and donated all of our time. But what that means is Project Forest is kind of unique in the space because we don't really have a lot of overhead. So all of my time is donated. The only expenses that Project Forest will incur is executing the program. So that'll be growing trees, planting trees, engaging with members once things happen. And, you know, there's different levels of participation. But for the folks that are participating at the silver, gold, and platinum levels, they're able to come out onto our project area and have a planting day. And there'll be some supervision and some planting that happens with that. And we'll be able to engage with some of these folks to teach them more. But I guess further to your point, what problems can we solve?
Yeah.
There's companies out there that have CSR or corporate social responsibility goals, and they're like, oh, how do we meet this? What is something that we can do? Well, Project Forest can help meet some of your CSR goals, you know, by planting trees, rewilding the landscape, removing carbon from the air, creating habitat, you know, for the critters, and a legacy for you and me. There's another thing called environmental social governance, and that's what a lot of publicly traded companies right now, and some private ones, are working towards increasing their ESG rating. And of course, Project Forest will fall into the environment part of the ESG, and we're able to help, you know, really increase the environmental score and some of the social aspects based on engaging with the community, having good culture, employing local people, and creating economic opportunity in different parts of the province. So the E and the S are areas that Project Forest can help. And then, you know, we've heard it in the news, and we've heard commercials from some of the larger tech companies in the world, and even, you know, it trickles down to the smaller mom and pop shops. But becoming carbon neutral is becoming a really important part, even for our nation, right? We were trying to become a carbon neutral country. There's carbon neutral companies, and there's carbon neutral people out there, and planting trees is a way to help become carbon neutral. For example, on our first location called Project Forest Golden Ranches, which is just about 30 minutes east of Edmonton on the south shore of South Cooking Lake, 1 hectare of land that will be rewilding will remove a little bit over than 1,060 metric tons of carbon dioxide over its lifespan. So simple calculations is how much carbon do you emit and how much would you like to remove by planting trees? And we can help companies kind of hit on all three of these points. You know, some folks are like, oh, we're 80% of the way there. We need to get the next 20%. Well, Project Forest, we're the ones that can get you over the finish line. So what we're looking to do is help solve corporate challenges and problems where, you know, there's companies out there looking to do good. And in turn, you know, what I've been telling everybody is you can use your advertising dollars to help save the world and grow your business. And there's not a lot of things out there that kind of work synergistically like that, because telling the world about your Project Forest story, certainly brings positive attention to your company, and you can interact and attain new and retain customers that you may have not had before. Folks looking to engage with companies supporting initiatives like Project Forest.
Does Project Forest get carbon credits then? Or do you qualify for?
No, that's a good question, and one that I get to answer a few times a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Canada and really North America, there's very few opportunities to create marketable carbon credits from an afforestation project.
Really?
Now, what afforestation is, basically what we're doing is taking non-productive agricultural land and transitioning it back into forest.
Okay.
A lot of the afforestation carbon protocols that have mostly been set up by the United Nations, the number one distinguishing factor to make you eligible or not is are you a third world nation? So what the United Nations has tried to do is really stir economic opportunity in parts of the world that just don't have it, and that's a really good thing. Yeah. And really, trees do grow faster and remove more carbon in the tropical parts of the world as well. So from a carbon perspective, we're removing more carbon. Here in Canada, we don't have it yet for an afforestation protocol. There's other ways to get carbon credits from trees, but we're not there at the moment. That said, I've been in contact with numerous folks, and I believe 3 to 7 years from now, there'll be a standard in place. And at that point, we can have a conversation and see if it makes sense for Project Forest. The other reason that we're not doing it, and it's a long-winded answer to what could have just been a one-word answer. No, but on our project locations is we've partnered up with some great conservation associations here in the province. So Golden Ranches is owned by 4 of them: the Nature Conservancy of Canada, the Alberta Conservation Association, the Edmonton Area Land Trust, and the Alberta Fish and Game Association. And when we engage with them, they ask me the same question. And when I kind of gave the answer, no, we're not looking to create marketable carbon credits, they were super happy with it because they're looking to achieve some more conservation standards and not necessarily have markets driving everything that they're doing.
I see.
So that's good for them. But what the extra benefit is for Project Forest by partnering with these associations, folks like the Nature Conservancy of Canada, they're not able to sell land unless the potential buyer can prove to their board that they'd be a better steward of the land than they would be. And that doesn't happen often because, the Nature Conservancy of Canada, that's what they do. Private landowners often aren't able to be a better steward than they are. Folks like the ACA have never sold their land. So what that provides Project Forest is the ability to say that we have permanence on all of our project locations. So when our partners invest in Project Forest and commit to planting trees, what we can commit to them and the public and the citizens of Canada is that our forest locations or our project locations will become a mature forest one day and will be picked up by something called the National Forest Inventory. And that's a non-government organization created by the federal government to do an inventory of the Canadian forested land base annually. And then we monitor the changes, whether it's plus or minus, and that gets reported to the Paris Climate Accord. So all the corporations and companies participating in Project Forest can say with confidence that we're helping battle climate change and meet our country's commitments to climate change to get reported to the Paris Climate Accord. Right. Which I think is pretty special. There's not a lot of folks out there that would be able to say that or participate in a meaningful, impactful way, and we provide that opportunity.
It just seems like if you had a tree or a lot of trees that you grew and planted a forest and they take carbon out of the air, it would be an opportunity for a carbon credit, because oil and gas companies, if they put carbon in the ground, it's as good as cash.
The protocols around creating carbon from trees is a little bit complicated, and the accounting isn't simple. It's not one tree, and it's not. So let's just, for simplicity's sake, say every tree removes a ton of carbon.
Yeah, exactly.
But there are natural disturbances that take place across the landscape. Insects come through, fire comes through, drought comes through. We have natural mortality. So by having a simple conversion that says 1 tree equals 1 ton of carbon, really we can only sell 50 or 60% of that carbon because you have to create an insurance pool. And before we have enough land where it becomes marketable, we probably need to have a few thousand hectares under the program, and then there's some significance there.
Whereas an oil and gas company can put the carbon in the ground and you know for sure that it's all being sequestered.
That's right. Verified, you know exactly how much is there, and it happens right away. The other challenge that we face here in North America and in any northern hemisphere around the world is our trees just grow slow. So we're looking at 1,060 metric tons of carbon dioxide per hectare over the lifespan of that forest. I mean that our model is using a 150-year timeline to come up with that calculation.
Right.
And for the first 20 years, we're not really removing a significant amount of carbon, but we create a lot of biomass. So as that tree grows, that biomass and the habitat it creates is equally as important in my opinion, because we are creating, opportunities for critters to reintegrate into the landscape, home for birds and mammals, and also recreational opportunities for ourselves and our families that just necessarily weren't there before. So all those added benefits start becoming available to us prior to significant removal of carbon.
Do you ever worry about planting the wrong kind of trees? For instance, one of the criticisms of reforestation is that humans don't really know how to manage it, and we may be doing more damage than good.
I personally don't worry about it, but I know why the public does.
Yeah.
And I don't worry about it because I do understand kind of the biological relationship between the right tree planted on the right site, and it's a great question. So I come back to our first location project for our Golden Ranches. We're planting about 55 hectares, 110,000 trees and 10 different species. The one thing that we're able to commit, and it's really important, is the right tree for the right site. And I mean, we're not out here creating forests to be turned into lumber or 2x4s or pulp. We're here to create forests to remove carbon and create habitat and recreational opportunities. So species diversity is really key. And one of the things that is important is minimizing the fire risk. So we're not just having conifer forests. Varying species, we're incorporating a lot of deciduous trees and even some coniferous trees that don't burn as ferociously as some of the other ones. Ferociously is probably the right answer. But by incorporating, a diverse species mix, we're able to reduce the forest fire index. We're able to create extra habitat for the animals. And then, you're able to make sure if you have a part of your project that's holding more water, we'll plant the right tree that's able to deal with that moisture regime. And if you have a well-drained site, then we're going to plant a tree there that needs well-drained warm soils. So by having 10 species kind of in our back pocket, we've already created a reforestation plan that's been approved by the Nature Conservancy of Canada because they're the managing conservation group on that project. And we started growing those trees as of last week in preparation to start planting this summer. So you can't just go to Walmart and buy one of these trees.
Yeah, exactly.
Facilities.
Yeah.
And they take 8 to 18 months to grow. So we have to have our ducks in a row and our plans in place basically the fall before planting and then the next summer.
So you don't worry about planting the wrong kind of trees and making things worse than it would have been otherwise? Yeah,
no, it's just we've been doing this a long time, and kind of prior to starting the audio here today, the group of people that make up Project Forest, we've been, a part of growing over 1.5 billion trees. That's a significant amount of trees. A billion with a B, not now. And one of the folks, associated with us, Larry LaFleur, him himself, he's been a part of growing over 1 billion trees in the nursery industry here in the province. He's been responsible for creating nurseries and started with the federal, went to the provincial government and founded Tree Time Services and Smoky Lake Forest Nursery. I'll say back in the day, not to put any dates around that.
Yeah.
But Larry's been around for a long time, and just the rest of the folks that we surround ourselves here at Project Forest are experts in the business. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that we're, industry leading experts in the province and probably in the country of returning or restoring disturbed habitat back into forests. And if we were planting the wrong trees on the right site, we wouldn't have a business because people wouldn't hire us to do the work because the trees would be dying, kind of like what you're saying. So kind of creating that revegetation plan and understanding which plants work together synergistically and grow well is our expertise, and we're able to bring that to Project Forest and provide our partners with the same level of expertise that some of the largest energy companies in the world hire us to help them with and solve their problems.
Another criticism of nonprofits and sort of environmental agencies is that they may grow big and, the founder will end up paying themselves 6-figure, 7-figure salary. And there's no money left for the projects, how do you make sure that the money's actually going to the work, and that, the founder doesn't end up making getting rich?
Yeah, no, another good question. So what kind of sets, in my opinion, Project Forest apart from some other nonprofits out there is that it has been funded by Tree Time Services to date, and that's how my bills get paid personally. So the other hat I wear, you can see I'm wearing a Project Forest hat, but I have a Tree Time Services hat as well. And I'm the general manager of Reclamation and Forestry at Tree Time, and that's what pays my bills, and that's what will continue to pay my bills. The only bills that Project Forest will incur are services to complete the work, or some marketing or professional services that we may retain to help grow the business. At the moment, we don't have rent, we don't have phone bills, we don't have overhead. It's just strictly getting the nonprofit running and then purchasing trees. And, before we purchase trees, we have to come up with a plan. We have to do some site preparation with the equipment. All those things will be funded by Project Forest. But for the foreseeable future, there's no staff associated with Project Forest, as opposed to just kind of me volunteering my time, and then our board will direct work and execute it that way. Eventually, I think we'll have some assistants working for Project Forest as we continue to grow. But the intention here isn't for the founder or myself to, get rich and retire off Project Forest, but rather to really make significant impact. Plant a lot of trees, help these companies execute on their goals, and make the world a greener place.
Passion. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with paying yourself, maybe 6 figures of salary one day if the company gets big enough. But I think the criticism is that people aren't sure on the motivations or the incentives behind the company, right?
No, and that's a fair question. And you're right, everyone has to pay their bills, but what sets us apart right now is Project Forest doesn't have that overhead, or I haven't started Project Forest after quitting a different job, right? So it's safe and it's well backed, and there's some investment behind it, and we're committed to making sure Project Forest is I won't use the word institution, but an organization that's around for a long, long time.
Well, you always hear those, urban legends, or maybe it's true about those, or like Red Cross or something, where the guys are making millions of dollars, and who knows where the money goes.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just about accountability.
That's right, and public disclosure, which is what I think, being a nonprofit has a lot more transparency than being a for-profit business. And that's one of the other reasons that Project Forest has been set up as a nonprofit and not necessarily a division of a different company out there to make a profit. That also allows Project Forest to access some grant funding. And what we're actively working on here, our goal by the end of the year is we've identified 72 different grants that we're going to go after, and we're throwing a team at it, and we're going to spend a significant amount of time trying to get some of this grant funding, which will provide extra benefit to our partners, because that money is going to go towards the marketing, going towards the building and the operational parts of the business. So when our partners participate and they come in at the different participation levels, those dollars, we can plant more trees and do more good with partner dollars, and kind of use some of the grant funding to help the behind the scenes action. And that would be my goal right now. Is 2 goals: is let's build Project Forest with as many partners as we can. And once again, thanks for having me on the show today, because some of your listeners might be interested. And number 2, let's take advantage of the grants that are out there. And this isn't just government grants. There's a lot of corporate grants out there and sponsorship to help nonprofits with marketing, environmental initiatives, all these types of things. And we're going to really try and utilize that network efficiently to bring more value to our members in Project Forest.
Well, there's nothing wrong with making money. Let's just be clear. But I run a business, and I believe in free markets and capitalism. But it's just when the non-for-profit gets abused, that's the worry.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to rationalize that sometimes, and you say, and am I for or against paying the CEO of the Red Cross, $1 million a year in order to attract that high talent, that caliber of talent that they need or they want to run that organization? If you're not willing to pay that individual his market value, they're going to go work for a private institution. And I guess that would be the counter argument, right? To get the people in place to really effectively manage a a company, they're going to work for you or they're going to go work for the private industry. So that's the catch-22 and maybe some of the rationale behind it.
Interesting.
Like I said, right or wrong, it's just a perspective that's going to come up over a couple beers or coffees, morning coffees, Rose Bros coffees, having conversations about, why the world turns, right?
Yeah, for sure. In terms of deforestation, do you think that it's a real problem facing everybody, or is it hyperbole, or is it something that keeps you up at night?
It's a real problem internationally. So we're really lucky here in Canada, and I can't speak for other jurisdictions around the world, and I can speak specifically to Alberta. I'm a registered professional forester in the province and pretty fluent with the legislation. But the very Coles Notes condensed version is when a forest product company cuts down a tree, another tree has to be replaced, whether it's naturally or by planting it. And forestry is inherently a sustainable practice. And now that the criteria has changed for assessing reclaimed well sites and facilities in Alberta, it's also become sustainable. It's just a little bit longer until that resource has been fully extracted. And when reclaiming it, that will also be a forest one day. So deforestation provincially and really nationally, in my opinion, isn't a significant problem to other parts of the world.
In Canada, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, but there is illegal logging that happens across other jurisdictions, and those areas certainly aren't being planted. There's a lot of clearing for national forest or agriculture lands. I mean, we've all heard about the clearing of the Amazon. That's not sustainable. And as I guess as a global population, the amount of forested landmass is decreasing, and that's why initiatives like Project Forest and really anyone else out there in the world looking to do good and planting trees is important. Another great company is Centrist. Every time you buy one of their shirts and hats, they plant 10 trees. Quite often that happens creating a lot of mangrove patches, which is really, really important work. In a lot of these third world nations, and they're conserving shorelines and putting people to work, right? Putting the mangrove propagules, which is just a fancy word for a seed, right into the ocean and they grow. So all these different initiatives where people are coming together to make a difference, super powerful, super important. And, you can't just get the work done by one person. They say one person can make a difference, but maybe one person can create an organization, and then it takes a team and a community to really, come together. It's super important. What I think is community, what's the word I'm looking for?
Participation.
Collaboration. Yeah. Community collaboration coming together and to achieve, a challenging goal. We can do it if we're all on the same page.
So you think the deforestation, the main threat is coming from places like the Amazon?
One of them, and there's, if I could remember the name of the documentary, but there's certainly some illegal logging operations happening in Eastern Europe, where they just kind of go up there, they rogue harvest, and they bring the wood to a mill. And that's why it's really important for consumers when you're purchasing lumber or pulp products to make sure it's certified. So if you see something like SFI or FSC or even any Alberta standard, you can be rest assured at home that product is coming from sustainable harvesting initiatives somewhere in the world. If it's not third-party certified, it's kind of hit or miss. In my opinion, anything happening really in Canada, the provincial legislation is normally really good. But where those certifications, what they do is they bring assurances to the public that if the governments in place don't have a good enough legislation policy and they're able to be certified by these institutions, that it's sustainably managed, and that's really important.
So you don't worry that even in Canada we're cutting down more trees than we're planting at the end of the day?
Do I worry about it?
Yeah.
I guess my perspective is a little bit different. I mean, knowing in Western Canada alone this year, we planted over 340 million trees. So that's BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan. That's a lot of trees.
That's cool.
And a lot of these trees that are being planted, the BC Ministry of Forests is planting significant amount of trees every year to help offset all the forests that have been lost to forest fire. And that's really creating a huge boom in the nursery and the tree planting industry. So for the last number of years prior to the government making a commitment to reforest some of these areas that aren't really under environmental liability by a corporation, what it's done is create more value for the people doing the work. So the tree planters have finally seen some increased and better prices, and the nursery industry as well, after being relatively flat for 15 or 20 years. I mean, we can always plant more trees, and that's why Project Forest is around. So that's how do you deal with a problem? We don't complain about it. Try and create a solution. That's kind of always my philosophy.
Well, another criticism is that no matter what we do, the amount of trees being cut down is always going to be higher than any effort that people make. But it sounds like companies like Project Forest, 10 Tree, One Tree Planet are making a tangible difference.
Yeah, very much so.
Rose Bros Coffee.
Rose Bros Coffee, you know, specifically bringing us all together to talk about these things. It's really good. Is there always going to be industry? The world is always going to keep moving forward. We're going to keep moving products. One of the reasons that inspired me to get into forestry wasn't just to, go into the forest and find some pretty awesome fishing spots. I truly believe it's a sustainable industry. There's other industries out there that do clear trees and don't necessarily have to replant them. And that's where some of these conservation groups and non-for-profits come in to offset that in different areas. Some of the main challenges that the conservation groups that we work with is funding, right? So the ACA, the NCC, those folks who own the land, they actually spend a considerable amount of their budget on taxes, on property taxes.
Yeah.
So, and they have a lot of staff, and all these things are important. You got to pay people to do the work. People aren't going to volunteer, and that's fine. Or if they do, I mean, you just get a different quality of service. So they have all this land to manage. They have a lot of overhead. And then folks like Project Forest are able to come in and help them execute on very specific goals. So of all their land packages, we work with the groups and say, hey, which ones do you guys want to have some trees planted or some forest created? Let's come up with a plan and we'll help make this happen immediately. And that's kind of, would the work happen? Yeah, it's going to happen eventually, but the budget constraints really slow down the progress. And that's what we're hoping to do is, really kickstart it and create as much impact as we can, as fast as we can. We heard New Zealand recently declared a climate emergency. And then I was listening last night, John Kerry in the United States is, Biden's new climate advisor. He says, we're in a climate emergency and we have to act now. So you keep having all these voices, international powerful voices, or even David Attenborough with his new documentary, saying we need to act now, we need to do something. And that's kind of the inspiration behind getting people involved in Project Forest. It's just identifying that, if you wait a year, 2 years, 3 years, it could have been better if we did it today. So let's all get on board and make a difference. I mean, there's an ancient Chinese proverb: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Yeah. The second best time is now. So let's kind of work together and try to get some trees in the ground.
So you guys have a ton of experience on the ground and sort of hands-on experience. I just watched that David Attenborough film, and it's kind of a climate alarm sort of thing. And again, that's another criticism, is that it's just like a doomsday scenario, and it's kind of like alarmism. Do you think it's true? Is it a big problem? Or
there's certain parts of that film that really resonate with me, and are definitely true. And I think I obviously don't know David Attenborough except for listening to a bunch of his, movies and TV shows. But sometimes alarmism is what we need to get the ball rolling and to kickstart action. So if we're exaggerating at some points, it's for a good cause. That said, if we don't make a difference and we don't start making some changes, the experts are telling us we're in for some significant changes in the way we all live our lives.
Have you seen problems?
The power if we act now to change that.
Have you seen problems like in your own personal experience in Alberta? Have you seen changes? I mean, that's what I think a lot of people don't, it doesn't resonate because it's so macro.
Yeah, what we are seeing is shifts in the weather. The weather patterns are changing. We're having longer, colder winters and hotter, drier summers. And we noticed that with some of the projects that we're working on, and how we're managing that is using sometimes different seed location. So as I said earlier in the podcast, you can't just collect seed from Edmonton and plant it in Fort McMurray. But with global warming, what we're doing is sometimes we're taking seed from the south and moving it a little bit further north. As we know, the northern regions will start experiencing warmer climates. So we're kind of using genetics and advancing that evolution. And what I'm seeing is, unfortunately, we have sites that we've reforested that get zapped out by drought, or if you get a real cold, long winter, significant tree mortality. A few years ago, we had the longest -20 stretch. They called it the polar vortex. I'm sure you all remember that winter.
Yeah.
Where, the Arctic air mass came down, and then the next year we had, a whole week of -40. These things happen. They're becoming more frequent, and we're having to make changes in the way we come up with vegetation plans. Mortality increases, so we just have to plant a few more trees and be really cognizant on where we're planting the trees to buffer them from these larger variations in temperature and moisture volumes. It's either a lot of moisture or not a lot of moisture. So we need to be really cognizant of that and come up with a plan that allows the trees to be in the best position to thrive. So that's kind of my micro
exactly.
observations. On a global scale, I mean, we all see the news, and I've never remembered this many hurricanes coming through. Right? So these types of things is just as the water warms, weather becomes more dynamic.
I think the criticism with climate change is not something you can prove true or false, like an equation, but that's the great thing about tree planting, and that's why I like it, is you can't really argue that tree planting is bad, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, not just from a environmental perspective, but from a holistic perspective too. There's a lot of research out there saying, if you're feeling down or you need to ground yourself, go for a walk in the forest. There's some added health benefits immediately just from a little walk in the trees. So that's one of the opportunities we're able to create. And, further to that climate change point, I of course have some personal opinions. The climate's been changing for a long, long time. Right? So,
well, that's the thing. Nobody, I don't know. I don't get into it, but
change happens. But I think the science is pretty clear that it's just happening faster now. Right?
Interesting. I mean, like I said, it's kind of just like trees are a safe bet. You can't really argue it's a problem or a bad thing, and that's what attracted us to it. And I like about it.
Couldn't agree more. Every tree we're able to get in the ground and growing is a good thing, definitely.
Do you have a problem marketing the business to kind of more traditional energy companies that maybe have older, more entrenched opinions on climate change and the environmental side of things?
We're pretty new, but what I'm going to say no. Even these more traditional companies. So you look at some of the largest energy companies in the world, Shell and British Petroleum, they have some pretty robust plans on green energy plans, investing in solar and wind as they want to diversify their energy portfolio. But that said, it comes back to that ESG thing. So when companies are required to keep a good ESG rating to be considered components of investment funds and mutual funds, that kind of is the catalyst to get things started, right? I mean, Project Forest isn't really able to help the governance piece of ESG. That's more corporate structure and transparency. But certainly in the environmental and social, we're able to create a significant positive impact there that can help these corporations meet their goals. And some of these larger traditional energy companies have some of the most robust ESG programs out there.
Yeah, see, I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah. And what's driving, I mean, you have to spend money to get the ESG rating, but if you're able to access more markets or more funding and business loans, that's certainly going to make, an investment of Project Forest of $20,000 seem insignificant if you're able to potentially increase the value of your company or access some funding streams that you wouldn't have been available to if your ESG score wasn't high enough. So that's one of the problems we're trying to solve and working with these companies to meet some of these metrics they're looking to achieve.
I think what's cool about Project Forest and you guys is you actually have experience in the field and you've learned everything there is to know about it and you deal with industry, versus a lot of the environmentalists and people kind of out there, they have a lot of criticism and a lot of things we need to do, but they don't have any actual hands-on solutions, right? And they're not willing to work with industry like you guys.
And that's one of the other things that sets us apart. Like I said earlier, I don't know if we talked about this on the podcast, but yeah, we did. Every project location that we create will become a mature forest, and that comes from experience and understanding what the cost and the inputs are. So like we have dollars accrued to do the surveys and create and complete additional silviculture treatments if they're necessary, and understanding what it takes to get a farm field into a forest, kind of like what you see behind me. It's not a simple process. It doesn't happen overnight. We got to have a plan in place. And like I said, it's something we do every single day. I think in some of the documentation I may have sent to you, if I haven't already, our head silviculturist at Project Forest and the present Tree Time Services, earlier in his career, he worked on some large afforestation projects. And, these areas of land that he worked on are 20 years old. And you would never know they were a farm field before.
That's cool.
And I'm happy to share those pictures with you. They're big, beautiful spruce trees, and they look like a forest, and very indicative of the work that we're going to be able to accomplish for our partners. So I'm excited. I guess I'm 39 now, so when I'm 59, I'm looking forward to seeing some big trees and some big forests, and say, wow, we came together and made some pretty significant impacts here.
But you're not just driving to the protest site or paddling out in the water in your kayak protesting an oil site, right? You're actually doing something.
Yeah, I mean, my wife owns a kayak, but not for protesting.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like, you're actually, tangible results.
And that's what I said earlier is there is a place for protesting, and I think it's important. That said, me personally, if there's something I'm really passionate about and there's a problem out there or something that I think where change needs to happen, let's come up with the solution. Let's work together to make that change, as opposed to just talking about it. Talking about it and protesting is important, but I think it's more important to find a solution to these things. And if the government can't do that for us, and that's fine. We live in a society where we're empowered to be able to create things like Project Forest or Rose Grows Coffees, where sustainable based businesses out there to make a difference. And that's kind of what I've tried to do here with Project Forest is, bring the responsibility back to the corporate world, and let's work together to make progress as opposed to just talk about it. But thanks for noticing that, because certainly conversations my wife and I have, I'll say monthly, not every day, but we talk about it a lot.
Well, I think that's the worry. I mean, you've experienced that at Rose Bros Coffees. You don't get perceived as those eco-alarmists or eco-terrorists or kind of far left, all talk, no substance sort of thing. And I think, that's something you guys are able to do is, kind of prove you've worked with industry and demonstrate that.
Maybe a new term we can coin today, eco-realists, right?
Yeah, like exactly. I don't know.
Identify a problem, come up with a plan, and let's execute on it and make a solution.
Yeah. Do you see a particular environmental problem that stands out from the rest when you look out? Is there something that, like deforestation or climate change, that maybe is more of an issue than all the others?
That's a tough one for me.
Species loss, habitat loss.
Yeah, it's just.
Is it all related?
I don't know. I'm pretty passionate about the climate change initiative here, and it kind of goes through, like, my wife's a travel blogger, and we put a lot of our personal time into exploring the world. And just recently, we were able to go to Antarctica before COVID broke out. And one of the real driving factors, why do we want to do this trip now, this time in our life? Well, things are changing real quick, and we want to go see that environment in its current state before things change. So by working together, we can help slow these changes that are happening down there. And a really, really interesting part of that trip for us is, even 3 or 4 years ago, the amount of whales that were in that part of the world were significantly less. and we saw whales every single day. There was a huge whaling industry in that part of the world for many, many years around World War II. And they thought that the whale populations would come back in 10 or 15 years after a lot of that industry had been shut down, but it didn't. It took a long, long time. And what the people on the boat were telling us is, this is the most whales we've ever seen on a trip. And we really saw them coming back, 3 years ago. So that's just another example of the world coming together to make changes and creating opportunities for the environment to improve. And that's why for me, like climate change is important, and the fact that we're able to use trees, and I didn't necessarily get into forestry or learn about silviculture to do that, but now that it's an opportunity for me to make a difference, I want to be out there and do it.
Were there any books that kind of set you off on that path, or was it mostly media that kind of?
To set me down the forestry path was a couple things. My father's an accountant, and he sits behind the desk all day, and I just wanted to be outside doing something.
Okay.
And I love the outdoors. I've always, since a kid, needed to be outside, needed to be experiencing nature, and I wanted a job that allowed me to do that and manage it and be responsible for it, right?
I've along the way, I've read a few books that really kind of open your eyes, and I guess it's a lot of media too nowadays that really influence you in terms of the environment. But so you don't worry about the environmental narrative being too extreme on one end. Long story short.
Like I said, eco-realism is kind of where I like to, if we're going to go have a conversation, I like to talk about the facts, because there are a lot of alarmists out there.
Yeah.
If you don't know exactly what's happening, so like a key example is, like I said, how many of your listeners know we planted 340 million trees in Western Canada? It's like, is logging a bad thing? Fair enough. Natural disturbances where a fire comes through, there's a lot more organic material left on the landscape when all these natural processes were happening. Like you and I both live in houses built out of wood. We use paper every single day for a variety of purposes. And these are things that are built into our society, and we need to come up with the best way to manage them and minimize the impact. So kind of meeting in the middle ground. There's always going to be people on the far left and the far right. I kind of identify with the centrist mentality of how can we minimize our impact and still live in a society that we're accustomed to here in Canada.
What's the biggest myth around deforestation and planting trees? Are there any misconceptions?
Yeah, that people log and don't come back, and you just kind of leave it as is. And I mean, and back in the 70s and the 80s, that happened. And David Suzuki had that, documentary that he put out on CBC and exposed the forest industry for exploiting the landscape. And I mean, that was true back then, but it's not true now. And that's where, folks like him, was pretty well respected in some circles of the country, made a huge difference and shone the light on some of the problems in the industry, and the industry's responded miraculously. Certainly, we weren't harvesting as much land back in the day, but to say we planted over 300 million trees is, it's hard to actually wrap your head around how many trees that is, right? It's one thing to say 340 million, but one of our nurseries, they produce 8 to 10 million trees a year. So you think about how many jobs that one documentary has created. And a lot of this environmental legislation, kind of the catch-22 is like, industry doesn't want to participate because it's going to cost more money. But every time you come up with an environmental requirement for these companies to make, it creates a whole new industry, right? So for oil and gas reclamation, the environmental associations here in Alberta, full of some very talented, really smart, passionate people working to clean up the messes that we make in order to drive a car, in order to make a computer or a TV, right? These are all things that we use every single day, and there's industries and people in place to manage that environmental liability to the best of our ability.
So the environmental problems have almost presented themselves as business opportunities in some ways.
Very much so, in jurisdictions that support that. I mean, there's other places in the world. I have friends who are drafting architects that make oil and gas infrastructure, and there's other places in the world where these pipes run right on top of the ground, and unfortunately there's oil leaking, and it's not a great environment to it's not great for the environment, but in places like Alberta, I think it's a big misconception of dirty oil. Really, there's companies out there spending millions and millions of dollars on cleaning up the messes. And when oil prices are challenged like they are right now, there's still budgets going towards cleaning these things up. And when it's boom times, there's even more money being spent on cleaning up, the environmental liabilities that the companies have.
So that's
They're cleaning it up because of the legislation put in place by our governments. And if that legislation wasn't there, would it happen? Hard to say. Some companies might, but we know there's some companies that certainly wouldn't. And they'd just be answering to the shareholders and maximizing profits. So that's why I feel operating in this part of the world, it's the best place to produce oil in the world because of the scrutiny and the environmental regulations placed on our companies. It's really world class. And I guess that's something we need to do a better job as an industry talking about.
That's so refreshing, because here you are as the leader of a tree planting company supporting the Canadian oil and gas industry. I mean, you don't hear that very often. I think that's the message that gets lost.
And I guess personally, I said that's the centrist mentality, is understanding what is it. You can't be far left and enjoy the resources and not be in contradiction to yourself.
Yeah.
And you can't be in far right and say, drill baby drill, and not clean up the mess. So it's like, if we're going to have industry and we're going to live the lifestyle we're living right now, we need to make sure we have budgets in place to clean up the mess. And there's always a middle ground. I mean, if you want to be, the far leftist and you want to go live in the forest by yourself, fair enough. But I mean, there's 7 billion people on Earth. That's not possible right now. So it's just finding, like, how do we feed the people and how do we provide folks a lifestyle that they're able to enjoy. Right?
That's really cool.
Things have to work together.
Yeah. Do you find many people share that opinion, or is that kind of the centrist view rare?
I find people to be more polarized a little bit further left or right than myself. And I just try and depoliticize most of my conversations. It's really important for me personally and for Project Forest, is we want to engage with people that are far left and far right and bring them together. Creating that community of environmentally responsible businesses and people, that's one of our missions, right? And like our partners have the opportunity to participate in an annual general meeting. What that looks like in a COVID or post-COVID world, something we're working towards. So maybe after the vaccines roll through and the fall comes and we're able to host an AGM, our intent is to create this community where businesses can come together and meet each other and do business with each other, right? So let's support folks that are championing sustainability and efforts and initiatives like Project Forest or anything else, and give them the opportunity to do business with each other as opposed to somebody else who necessarily isn't championing that cause. And kind of that corporate responsibility from Project Forest point is, you're going to invest money in Project Forest, and we want to make sure our partners are getting the most benefit possible. And that's something that's really important to me, because it's not just planting trees, and we're not just rewilding, we're not just removing carbon. We're trying to make like a community of people coming together to really make a difference. And that's just another way to do that, is supporting each other for good causes.
Well, and the cool thing is that maybe in 20, 30 years, you can actually go see the forest that you planted. And it's not just some grandiose pie in the sky sort of thing that you talk about.
And written down as one of our mandates is all of our Project Forest locations are going to be within 100 kilometers of the municipal center.
Right, kind of like micro initiatives.
Yeah, forests in our backyard. I mean, not micro. We're working on landscapes 50 hectares plus in size. Location is key, because I want you, and I want me, and I want our grandkids to be able to go out there and experience these legacies that we're creating. They're going to be forests forever. And you'll be able to go out there and touch it and breathe it and feel it and see the birds, and maybe you'll see a deer or something. And that's all because we came together and created this forest, as opposed to helping another important initiative. But if it's halfway around the world, you don't actually get that direct benefit. Yeah. Right? I like to reiterate as much as I can, everything's really important. But if you partner with Project Forest, you're going to be able to feel it, breathe it, and touch it and really experience it. And that's one of the things that really sets us apart. for folks looking to participate here in Alberta and in Canada.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to leave the conversation.
Yeah, once again, I do appreciate the invitation. And it's just, like I said, refreshing on my part to be invited, a coffee company having a podcast centered around this idea. That's really cool. And we're happy to help out and spread the word. And kind of like I said before, we'll have this podcast up on our website, and we'll do a shout out for Rose Bros Coffee, and hopefully folks that are participating in Project Forest can, support you guys as well. Really important work that you guys are doing, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your fans and your customers.
I appreciate it. Any advice for people looking to help out in a certain way other than contributing to Project Forest?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. If you're I won't say just an individual. If you're an individual and in a position to participate on a corporate level, please find us on social media. So we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Find one of our posts that resonates with you and tag a company that you think might benefit from a partnership with Project Forest. And what we're going to do for that, simple act is we're going to plant a tree on your behalf. So for every company you tag, that's one extra tree planted. And Project Forest is committed to planting 2,000 trees on Project Forest Golden Ranches to support this initiative in our campaign. Go check out our video. Our first marketing campaign is called Forest Suck. That's a good thing. For those of you listening and not on the YouTube channel, you'll see some smoke kind of behind me in the background. And really, Forest Suck caught me off guard when our marketing company presented it to me. Offended me a bit, but then I started thinking about it. Forests do suck. We remove carbon from the air every single day. Like, we're cleaning the air. We're sucking out the bad and giving out the good. And that's kind of what we're trying to say with Forest Suck. There'll be new marketing campaigns coming out in the future, but really, if you want to make a difference in your person, please find us on social media and tag a company you're passionate about.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Trevor. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I really appreciate it too. We'll wrap it up there.
Fantastic.